This is truly one of the biggest mysteries of Central Ohio.
27-year-old has his life in front of him, might be getting married, going to be a doctor, and he disappears without a trace.
He's seen going into a bar, he's never seen leaving.
How do you literally vanish off the face of the earth?
Was somebody following him? Did something happen inside the bar? There are so many what ifs. It just adds to this mystery. Columbus, Ohio. A beautiful city, the capital city of Ohio. A lot of people joke you are born and bred a Buckeye. And if you live in Columbus, I mean, you're right there with Ohio State. A huge university, and as you're driving north on High Street, you can just get that college feel, and you can see the expansion of Ohio State.
Brian Schaefer was a second-year medical student at The Ohio State University. He really wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to follow in his mom's footsteps. She was a nurse.
Brian was extremely intelligent. He did well in school. Really believed in things that he believed in. He wasn't always that clean-cut medical student. He had long hair for a while. That was one of the reasons that his tennis career ended, because they wanted him to cut his hair and he didn't want to do it.
Had a girlfriend, had his own place, had his own apartment. He was actually in the top 10% of his class. I mean, he had the world waiting on him.
Alexis Wagner was Brian's girlfriend at the time. They had been together for approximately 10 months.
We were in medical school, in our first year of medical school, actually, in class. And I thought he was cute, and one of my friends told him at a concert, and then he called and asked me if I wanted to go and have dinner and study. That's how it started.
Alexis and Brian were at that good part in a relationship. It's new, it's fresh, it's exciting.
They were actually planning on going on a trip to Miami for spring break. The tickets were actually the last Christmas present that Brian's mom had purchased for him. His mom passed away after a long battle with cancer.
Brian and Clint had made plans to go out and celebrate spring break and have a few drinks. They were close friends. They started out around 9 o'clock when they went to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, which is in the Gateway complex near campus.
Sat down, opened the tab, and had 3, 4, 5 shots of liquor.
The Ugly Tuna Saloona is a very loud and energetic second-story bar. They were famous for these huge fishbowl, like $5 drinks that would pretty much last most people all night.
Brian and Clint ended up going to another bar called the Short North Tavern, had a couple drinks there, and they ended up in a bar called Brothers. Typical college guys just out having a good time, not bothering anybody.
Alexis had actually went home to her parents' house before her and Brian left for their trip Monday for spring break. Brian took the time to call her around 10 p.m. and just tell her he was out with the guys and having fun and he couldn't wait to see her on vacation. Brian and Clint decided to end their evening by going back to the Ugly Tuna Saloona and checking out the band.
It's kind of a long walk, so Clint contacted a female friend of his, Meredith Reed, and she ended up coming and picking him up and driving back to the Ugly Tuna Saloona. There's cameras there, so when they got back, we were able to pick them up coming into the parking garage. Then they entered into the area where the escalators go up to the Ugly Tuna Saloona.
They look happy. They look like nothing is wrong at all. He's even kind of leaning back on the escalator, kind of relaxed even.
And they're all just chatting, having a good time. They entered into the Ugly Tuna, which there's no cameras inside the Ugly Tuna. And they sat down, it's loud, there's a band playing, started drinking again. Towards the end of the night, Brian got up, he walked out. It's a little lobby-like area at the top of the escalator. When he went out there, he talked to 2 girls, and then you see him walking off camera. appears he's gone back into the Ugly Tuna Saloon, and that's the last time we see him on camera.
So what they say is that Brian says, I'm going to go up, talk to the band, starts to walk away. Clint and Meredith do not see him again.
Clint and Meredith went around looking for him. They said they couldn't find him. They did try to contact him by a cell phone and didn't have any success, and so they left.
At 2:01 a.m. when Meredith called Brian's cell phone, it did go straight to voicemail.
I'm assuming that they thought that he had caught a ride or ended up deciding to walk home. All Saturday, nobody realizes Brian's missing, other than I think Alexis started to get worried because she's calling, no answer, no answer.
She left Toledo on Sunday. She went straight to Brian's apartment because she had not heard from him. She found everything very neat and tidy the way Brian had always left it, bed made.
It was very suspicious. You know, his car was still outside his apartment, his clothes were still there. It's as if nothing happened.
His glasses were still there, and she knew that that bed had not been slept in. So she knew pretty quickly that there was something wrong, like something was definitely out of the ordinary.
There was no activity on Brian's credit cards or bank cards after he went missing.
I was very brokenhearted and just very scared and didn't really know what to think.
She called the family and alerted and said something's not right. He hasn't slept in his bed. I'm sure that they felt that urgency. I mean, they went out that night and started searching dumpsters, you know, and they had just learned that he was missing.
They knew that he would show up to the airport Monday morning for his flight to Miami with Alexis. So once he didn't show up, that's when the investigation went into full swing and he was reported missing.
We got a call from Randy, Brian's father, and we ended up meeting Randy at Brian's apartment. You start thinking, okay, well, this guy didn't show up on Monday morning to catch his flight.
From all accounts, he was excited to go on that trip. That was a gift his mother, Renee, had given Brian for the last Christmas, right before she had passed away. I have to think that he would have used that gift.
We initially did a canvas of about a 6 to 10 block area around the Ugly Tuna Saloon. We knocked on doors, talked to people. Did you hear anything? Did you see anything? Went through and checked dumpsters, went down into sewer lines. This is probably the largest investigation in Columbus police history. We probably had close to 100 officers involved.
Since Brian disappeared, there has been no material possession found that we can relate to Brian Shaffer. That includes a wallet, his clothing, his shoes. Nothing has been found that they can connect back and say, this was Brian Shaffer's.
I just been thinking of every facet that I can think of to try and find my son.
Brian's father, Randy Shaffer, was relentless, like any other parent would be. He gathered friends and family. They would post flyers on every single telephone pole up and down High Street.
And that's when we started going over to the Ugly Tuna Saloon, the place where we believe he was last seen. The campus gateway area takes up a couple blocks, multiple different shops in there, some restaurants. It's a pretty good sized complex. They have a movie theater. Detective Edwards went up to the control room where they keep their files and their security cameras. And what we found was discs with hours and hours of video on it. Detective Edwards started reviewing them. He had a projector, started viewing the video at home on his basement wall, and he made it life-size. He actually tracked every person coming in. And I mean, this was a daunting task.
Taking this method, he was able to say with 100% certainty that Brian Shaffer entered the bar, but he is not seen on any cameras leaving the bar.
It is alarming. How do you literally vanish off the face of the earth in one of the areas where they say that there was more cameras than any other area around? There was a 6'2", 165-pound guy walks into a bar and you never see him again. Like, it's not logical.
Isn't that odd? I mean, they looked at every frame of every angle of every piece of surveillance video, and they don't see him.
This was a small bar, actually. It was not huge at all. People would say, well, maybe he was in the bathroom and you didn't see him. No, it was a tiny bathroom. Like, I believe it was one stall.
Something had to have happened where he was either concealed, disguised. There's some reason that we didn't see him, at least on the surveillance cameras. And then there was the orange sweater guy.
There was something a little off.
We seen him on video. He was in and out, in and out. So we tracked him down.
You have a perfectly scripted Hollywood-type story. Ohio medical student, a future in front of him, and then suddenly he disappears after a night out on the town.
So he went out that night and walked from his apartment with Clint over to a bar called the Ugly Tuna. And from 1:30 to 2, he was there, and there's surveillance cameras all over that place, inside and out. And exactly 1:57 in the morning, that's the last time anybody saw anything.
It just looked like a guy with a couple friends out having a good time to me, and that's what scares me more than anything, I think.
There is a lot of speculation around the orange sweater guy. Columbus Police Department were able to pick him out of the surveillance and thought that there was something a little off.
They timed it down to seeing this guy in an orange sweater going up and down the escalator, I think 5 or 6 different times. The final time he's seen leaving was just behind when Brian's friends were also seen leaving.
So we tracked him down and we talked to him. Comes to find out he was a taxi driver and he was just hanging out so he could pick up a couple fares.
Columbus is one of the most surveilled cities. There is probably not 1 inch of any block in that area that can't be seen by law enforcement in some way. So the question is, how does a body leave a building when you have so many surveillance cameras surrounding the place?
I've been to it many times, and I could see all 4 corners of that bar. I thought, I don't understand how you lose somebody in here. Like, it's not big enough to lose a person in.
I worked a number of cases in missing persons, and this one is drastically different. And the result of that is right from the way it started. Both he, Clint, and Meredith were coming up the escalators. You see he was communicating, seemed happy, more or less leaning against the side here. The camera is the one that captured him standing in this area. I took the opportunity to spend some time in and around the Ugly Tuna Saloon. I'm trying to think, how did he do this? I try to walk down steps. I try to go to different locations. There's cameras everywhere. There's really nothing in there that would concern me, inside or out. But more importantly, I'll tell you why I was confident even more so. In the video, you'll see the Columbus police officers standing there, 2 and 3 at a time. If somebody wanted to take Brian and remove him from there, or if Brian wanted to sneak out, you're certainly not going to do it from a location that's got police officers standing there, armed, cameras, and you're just not going to do it. It's too much of a risk.
Perhaps somebody put his body in a trash can, which is why police were found searching landfills and specific spots where the dumpsters would have dumped the trash at that landfill, because that was a theory.
A lot of people believe that Brian could still be buried in the bar, in the walls, or in the construction area.
We started at the roof, we worked our way down. Any indication that maybe he was stuffed in a floorboard somewhere. The floors are all cement. The walls, they're block or plaster cement. There's just no way Brian was left anywhere in that building. I mean, it was searched with a fine-tooth comb. We had the cadaver dogs come in and go through that building, and had he been in there, even if he was covered up with dirt, they would have hit on it and picked up on it. One of the theories is he went down and got out the fire escape. There was only 2 ways into the Ugly Tuna at that time. It was through the door at the escalator or the fire escape.
That fire escape is an emergency exit that was within the Ugly Tuna Saloon bar. It would come out just to the side of the original doors he used to enter the Ugly Tuna Saloon.
We did interview the manager at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, and they said that nobody at any time went down the stairs and exited through those doors. We did check the other cameras in the courtyard, and we still weren't able to pick him up.
There's a lot of rumors that one of the ways Brian could have gotten out of the bar is by jumping over the second floor balcony. With his height, yes, it is possible, but I do think that with as crowded as the campus area was at the beginning of spring break, that would have been noticed by someone.
When you exit the Ugly Tuna Saloona, to your right would have been the service elevator and the emergency stairs going down into the hallway that runs behind the businesses. The van used that exit because they had equipment. They had to take the elevator. The detectives reviewed the video footage, and Brian did not leave with the band that night. Also interviewed each person in the band, and they all stated that Brian was not with them when he left the building that night.
We see Brian at 1:55 a.m. and the bar is closing at 2 a.m. So you have that 5-minute window of wondering what happened in that small window of time. Was somebody following him? Did something happen inside the bar, away from the cameras, that may have led to his disappearance?
So when Columbus Police Department began their investigation, they spoke to well over 100 people, including one person whose name raises eyebrows.
So you have an Ohio medical student, goes out for a night, he's seen going into a bar, is never seen leaving.
He talks to two young ladies. Suddenly, he's not there. He's gone. It was like he evaporated.
But he is not seen on any cameras leaving the bar. It's strange that Brian went missing right before a planned vacation. He was very excited about the vacation. Not only was it the last gift that his mom had given him, but he had also spent hours upon hours researching this trip, trying to make it as perfect as it could be for the ultimate spring break trip.
Randy did talk to me about what he thought was going to happen on that trip. He did feel that Brian may be getting ready to propose.
It doesn't matter what's happened. He just can come home. Just to let us know that he's safe would be, tremendous.
However, after it was looked into, Brian had never made a visit to the jewelry store. There were no rings purchased.
Maybe he bought the ring and we just don't know about it, but where's the receipts and where did the money come from? I mean, Brian didn't have a ton of money. He was a college student.
Why would somebody who had everything going for him, a future doctor, a great relationship that he was in, suddenly say, I'm done, and give up and walk away? He had a family that loved him. When you actually see the video of him going up that escalator, nothing seemed out of the ordinary for him. So you have to wonder what was going on behind the scenes. He just lost his mother to cancer. They were very close.
His mom died 3 weeks before Brian's disappearance.
I do think that it's possible that Brian could have chose to walk away from his life. He had a lot of stressors. One of those things would be a lot for most people, but to have multiple things such as his mom dying and medical school and finals.
I've heard that he may have said to Alexis prior to his disappearance, you just need to move on and find someone else. I really think that Brian had a hard time. I mean, he was late to his mother's funeral.
The day he went missing was very strange that he made an attempt to see every person he cared about. Brian began his evening by going to dinner at the Outback Steakhouse with his dad. Brian reached out to his brother and had invited him to come to dinner that night. He had called Alexis.
If I go down that path, that Brian ran away because he was stressed and just needed a break. It is really hard to cover your tracks. Now, Brian was intelligent, but would I do that after a night of drinking? Probably I wouldn't. I wouldn't choose that night.
One of the things that we examined was, did Brian have enough money to be able to flee without telling anybody? We originally thought that he's got to have a lot of money that's out there in loans, the cost of the school itself. Turns out that his mother, she was making a lot of the payments for the school and so forth to help him out. We were never able to find anything that would show that he was running out of money or that he was totally out of cash.
As far as Brian's credit debit cards. Randy had canceled those in fear that somebody might have stolen them, so we weren't able to pick up anything from the bank as regard to somebody using it.
When Brian went missing, he had not received his portion of his mother's life insurance yet, and that check was close to $20,000.
One of the things that we looked at, there was a check that Randy had given to Brian to pay for his tuition for the next quarter.
A check for $4,500. However, that check was never turned into Ohio State. Maybe Brian had just forgotten to turn it in, or maybe Brian chose not to turn it in because he had no plans of going back to school that next term.
Now, do I feel that something had to have happened to make him leave on his own? Yeah, something. I mean, people don't get up and normally just walk away from their lives.
Emotional issues that are held in, at some point they're going to come out. Is that the night they come out? Did something in that bar set him to think about his mom again when he was trying to kind of push it away and have a good time? And did he then remember that, start thinking about it, and something clicked? Because of all the studying and everything else that was on his mind, now his mother's passed away.
Another question that has come up is, did Brian commit suicide?
I did not get the impression at all that Randy felt that he was suicidal. And the thing I always come back to is, it's pretty hard to hide your body after you killed yourself.
There have been a lot of people talked to about the disappearance of Brian Shaffer.
You know, a lot of people ask about Clint Florence. He and Brian were friends.
Around 9:15, 9:30, I drove over to Brian's apartment after he had dinner with his father. And Brian was having a beer and then came up to High Street to Ugly Tuna.
At the end of the evening, Clint reported that Brian came back into the bar and after a couple seconds said that he was going to go talk to the band. And that was the last time that he had seen Brian.
At some point, we were told that Brian and Clint had a few words, a little bit of a heated argument. Nobody could hear him, so we really don't know what that was about.
Initially, when Brian went missing, Clint was very involved in the investigation, hanging up flyers. He was communicating with the family.
We decided we were going to polygraph Clint. He did hire an attorney. The attorney advised him not to take the polygraph.
Randy Shaffer took and passed his polygraph. Meredith Reed took and passed her polygraph. I do think it's a little strange that no one wants to communicate about Brian's disappearance, or else they don't remember what happened that night. It's very frustrating.
At one point, we did summon Clint to the grand jury to appear to answer questions. And again, based on his attorney's advice, declined to be interviewed at the grand jury. Does it look suspicious? To a lot of people, it probably does. But at no point was Clint a suspect. He wasn't a person of interest. He was never charged with anything.
Don Corbett had some email communication with Clint's attorney.
He sent me an email that clearly stated his client doesn't want to be contacted, but more importantly, he said, it's my understanding from what I'm told by the investigators that it's Brian that's causing his family all this pain. Brian was out there. The key word was alive, and told me that if you want to resolve this, you need to convince Brian to let people know and let his family know.
To my knowledge, no one has ever spoken to his attorney.
We know that Brian was standing at the top of the escalator at 1:55 a.m. and he was talking to the two girls on the surveillance video.
Brian even gave one of them his phone number. I think he even took the phone, put his phone number in it, gave her the phone back.
Well, that struck me as kind of odd. Brian's got a girlfriend. He's leaving to go to Miami. We were able to locate and identify who those two females were. They were both interviewed at length.
They were really just kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. They had never met Brian before that evening.
We see Brian at 1:55 a.m., and that's the last time we see Brian Shaffer on a surveillance video.
Clint and Meredith are seen at 2 a.m. on the escalator leaving the Ugly Tuna Saloona. At 2:01 a.m. when Meredith called Brian's cell phone, it did go straight to voicemail. "6 months after Brian disappeared, a shocking clue came in.
Alexis had been calling his phone, and she had done that nightly, and it would go directly to voicemail. One night, all of a sudden, the phone started ringing.
This is probably one of the biggest mysteries for Central Ohio. What happened to Brian Schaefer? He had a girlfriend, he was in med school, he had a future laid out in front of him, and then he suddenly disappears. So you have to wonder why. Was it foul play, or was it just too much?
In May of 2006, a few weeks after Brian went missing, his apartment was actually broken into one evening. And when CPD arrived, the person was gone.
To my knowledge, the person that broke into Brian's apartment has never been found. It is a very odd coincidence. And I've always wondered if foul play was involved, if that person that committed the foul play could have returned to Brian's home because he knew that there was something there that needed to be disposed of. I have no idea if that's the truth. I think it's very odd.
6 months after Brian disappeared, a shocking clue came in when his cell phone began ringing.
His girlfriend Alexis had been calling his phone every night, just seeing if he would answer, and it would go directly to voicemail. One night in September, all of a sudden, the phone started ringing. And that was very odd, that had never happened before. It actually was pinging off of a cell phone tower in Hilliard, Ohio, which is not very far from where Brian disappeared. I mean, it's not right across the street. It's within a distance that anybody from Columbus knows where Hilliard, Ohio is.
Detective Edwards and myself went over to the area, did a search, and we were unable to locate anything. At that point, we contacted the cell phone company, the carrier, and asked them, what's the probability that this phone has been turned on?
They were told that they felt that it was a glitch, that it was nothing to be alarmed about, that it was just a glitch. The phone had just rang.
The engineer at that time stated probably what was happening. The cell phone tower got busy, and it just rang to the next cell phone tower until it got picked up.
Now, we did investigate a little bit in the last few years to see what somebody would say about that now. What we were told is that they felt the phone was at least charged, it was not a dead battery, and that it may have actually been turned on. So what does that mean? Does that mean Brian's alive and he turned his phone on? Does that mean that if it was foul play, that killer all of a sudden turned that phone on and it just happened to be at the right time when Alexis called?
We have to look at the other side. Once he got out of that building, did something happen where he was killed? Or was he taken by somebody? He could have went out, he could have asked somebody for a ride, but he got in the car, something went south, and he was killed.
There's a lot of theories that Brian could have met foul play while walking home from the bar. In 2006, the campus area was pretty rough. It had a lot of abandoned houses still and a lot of crime in the areas.
Between 2006 2008, somebody was murdered in the parking garage right behind us that was right outside of the Ugly Tuna. So that kind of opened my eyes right then. I'm like, whoa, there's some stuff going on here.
Brian has walked that area many times back and forth because he lived close enough to where he could walk over to the Ugly Tuna Saloon and any of the other campus area bars.
If there was foul play, maybe they took his wallet. They would have dumped the wallet at some point somewhere along the way, and it'll be found at some point. But none of that happened. You have someone with all their personal belongings that were on them completely vanished.
His cell phone, his keys, clothing, nothing has ever been located.
No, I don't think there's any possibility he just took off. Brian had a goal, he had an objective, and knew which way he was going, and somebody interrupted that and messed it up.
Online communities are just drawn to this story for one reason or another. We had some emails a few years back where people were trying to connect Brian Shaffer to the Smiley Face murders.
The Smiley Face killings. There are at least 40 healthy young men allegedly marked for death, murdered in crimes made to look like drownings.
Detectives came down from New York. I did talk to them about the Smiley Face killer.
There's some of the more than 40 college-age men who mysteriously drowned, the tragedy spanning 25 cities and 11 states. Two former NYPD police officers there say that they are all murder victims linked to what they call the Smiley Face killings.
I believe that these young men are being abducted by individuals in the bars before they are entered into the water.
There are a lot of young, good-looking men, most of them college students, most of them are the same age range, that are found dead. They are very odd circumstances.
They were at a bar, like Brian. They left the bar. They got separated somehow from those individuals they were with, and they end up in a body of water, dead.
Several people tried to connect Brian's disappearance to the Smiley Face killer, but one of the things that has always happened with the other cases is there's a body found. And they're always found in the water, and there's usually a smiley face graffiti close by the body. However, Brian wasn't found in the water, and there were no smiley faces around the locations that they were searching.
There's a lot of speculations about the Olentangy River, but the probability that he drowned probably did not occur. There wouldn't have been enough current to take it anywhere.
The Olentangy wasn't even on his way home. He would have had to gone out of his way to get to the Olentangy. And there were searches done of the rivers close by. It was very low at that time, so I've got to believe that if he was in that river, we would have found him by now.
I did talk to two of the detectives came down from New York. I did talk to them about the Smiley Face killer. To this day, still do not believe that that's the situation with Brian.
I just been thinking of every facet that I can think of to try and find my son.
There would be many, many nights that Randy would call me crying or close to tears. He was very torn up over this loss. First, over the loss of his wife, Renee, that had passed away 3 weeks before Brian's disappearance. And then he gets hit again with his son disappearing suddenly. Then it was September 14th of 2008. Randy had called me at 6 something that night, and he told me there's a storm coming, it's a bad one.
Heck of a day for Galveston, Texas. Place that hasn't been hit by a hurricane in 25 years.
The rains are coming hard, and there goes my cap, by golly.
It was the winds from Hurricane Ike. This wasn't just a normal windstorm. This was, 50, 60 mile an hour winds had come through here. I didn't hear from him again that night. Person called and said, Lori, we've got really bad news. Randy was killed last night, and she said, by a tree.
After the storms had subsided a little bit, Randy had decided to go out to see the damage, and while he was outside doing that, a strong gust of wind came back in and knocked a tree branch off of his tree, and it fell on top of Randy, killing him.
No one could believe it. Here was just a genuine, nice man who's already had so much happen to him, and to not have answers before he died.
It is amazing to look at what the Shaffer family has gone through. I mean, think about it. It was a family of 4 that went down to 1. It was a mom, dad, 2 brothers, and now there's Derek, the brother. The reason I'm still involved almost 15 years later is because I made a promise to that father that I was going to help him bring his boy home, and that's why I do what I do right now. Shortly after Randy had died, there was an obituary online for him, and someone posted on that obituary, on the guest book, and said that he was Brian Shaffer. The statement was, "I love you, Dad."
So I looked down, and it says the U.S. Virgin Islands. Oh my God, could this be true? What does this mean? Is he out there and this was his way because he feels so bad that he couldn't be there? Concerning.
We were able to trace where the origins of the message came from, and it ended up being public area here in Columbus.
They determined it was actually sent from a public library computer in Franklin County.
We again went to look for surveillance video. Unfortunately, there was no record of who was on that computer that day or any video surveillance that would assist us into saying, yeah, that was Brian. Our thoughts at the time with the investigation, it was a cruel hoax.
There's so many instances in Brian's case that are just deemed as a hoax that sometimes it makes it a little hard to believe that there's this many coincidences in one missing person's case.
Now, could it still have been Brian writing that from Columbus? It could have, Could it have been somebody that harmed Brian and trying to throw it, off the investigation? It could have.
I actually lean more towards Brian Shaffer being alive and walking away from his life. While his mom's death was very tragic, I feel like that it was also the opening for Brian to start living to not just please his mother by becoming a doctor, and he could actually live his life the way he wanted to live his life.
One of the things that we noted that was interesting is that Brian would tell people, not only that, put it on his MySpace page, that this was only a temporary thing, him going to medical school and becoming a doctor. What he really wanted was kind of be a beach bum or start his own band and be out on a beautiful place somewhere with his guitar where he could kind of be on his own. Could that have been the case? Yes, he was very involved in music and enjoying that.
There have been sightings of Brian all over the world, from Sweden to India to Michigan.
But this one photo of a man crouched down, we started getting emails from people saying, have you seen this photo?
They had a lot of similarities.
People said, this is Brian. They know it's Brian.
A 27-year-old has his life in front of him, might be getting married, going to be a doctor, and he disappears without a trace. That's why this case has gotten all the attention.
It was probably the last few years where people started posting pictures of who they thought was Brian Shaffer. But this one photo of a man crouched down on the corner of a sidewalk, very long legs. People said, this is a picture of Brian in Tijuana, and the FBI gets involved.
They had a lot of similarities. The homeless man and Brian's noses were both broken in the same spot. Their ears fell on the same exact spot on the face. I had emailed it to Brian's detective at the time. After further analysis and more in-depth look at the pictures, they were able to determine it's not Brian.
That was like someone letting the air out of a massive balloon of all these years of people hoping that they finally had an answer.
I've been asked over the years what my opinion of the case is with Brian Shaffer. There is a probability that he could be alive, but there's also just as much or a greater probability that he is no longer alive. The dumpsters in the area at that time, for the private dumpsters, not the city dumpsters, they were emptied on that Monday before we got out there to do our searches. And the contract to where the trash was taken was to a landfill in Tennessee. Had we had gotten information sooner and we could have got out to the dumpsters before they were all emptied and hauled off down to Tennessee, maybe he did fall in there. Other than that, I can't think of anything else that we could have done that may have helped the case.
There's a lot of dumpsters in that area, so that one concerns me a lot, because if that happened, we will never find him.
When you actually see the video of him going up that escalator, he's doing what any normal 27-year-old person would do before spring break. They're going out to a bar. There seemed to be like nothing wrong. And that's part of the reason why I think this story captivated so many people in Central Ohio.
I think it was really hard when Alexis had to move on in her life. If Randy had his choice, she would have been marrying his son. He really thought the world of Alexis.
I used to have this feeling like when it first happened, like, how could somebody leave and how could he do that to me? And obviously that's impossible, and so something horrible must have happened.
If you've been in law enforcement as long as I have, At some point, there's always going to be a case that just sticks with you, and this is that case for me. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about this case.
This story for me is more than just a story. This is truly about a father who was desperate to find his son, or at the very least, get some answers as to what happened to him. And Randy Schaefer deserves that.
I am a firm believer that someone out there knows what happened to Brian Schaefer. I'm asking that if you were involved in the Brian Schaefer case and that you may have caused his disappearance, please find it in your heart to step forward and bring some resolution for the Schaefer family. They deserve that. Please contact the Central Ohio Crime Stoppers tip line at 877-645-TIPS.